flop, because it would have been so easy to make it that way and to treat the original film like, oh, we're going to soft reboot it, clap when you recognize the oxygen destroyer, but it doesn't do that.
I clapped when I saw it.
The callbacks do show up, but they're framed as necessary context that still matters in the present. The movie treats the original story like a wound that never fully closed, like any good sequel should. The bridge between the grounded tragedy of 1954 and the louder, more heightened 90s style of Godzilla ends up feeling really natural. The film never acts like it has to apologize for being a big, effects-driven kaiju movie, yet it still lets the emotional gravity of the earlier film sit inside the frame without being reduced to a member berries reference. The smartest version of this shows up through the Yamane connection. Bringing in the adopted grandson of Dr. Yamane really lands well. It's the movie insisting that these events change the people and the families in ways that we didn't even think of at the time. When you watch that movie, you don't think about what Yamane's wife was going through. I buy the human material more here than in a lot of Heisei entries because the characters aren't just standing around near the monster plot. Instead, the film does a really good job of trying to actually incorporate them into the themes that the film is trying to lay out for the audience.
What's that?
To me, Burning Godzilla is a huge reason as to why this movie feels so alive. I love this design because it communicates the movie's central fear before anyone even says a word. You see him, you know that this is dangerous, this is not normal, and he's in a lot of pain, so something must be very, very wrong. The opening night sequence where he tears through Japan is a great example of the film knowing exactly how to use that design well. The city lights and the glow of the suit create this apocalyptic image that still has a strange beauty to it. And I always walk away thinking about how much of this visual language anticipates what would later come down the road with Shin Godzilla in 2016. I also appreciate how the film handles the hypothetical, what happens if this goes all the way sequence. The CGI is kind of dated in the way that any 90s CGI is going to be dated, but the sequence still works because it has a very clear purpose. It's never trying to shock you for the sake of it. If anything, it's a really solid fake-out where you're like, wait, did that just happen? It's communicating scale, inevitability, and stakes in a way that you can grasp immediately. And I'd rather watch that kind of visual explanation than sit through another round of characters staring at readouts and repeating the same information with slightly different phrasing. Yes, we know the world is going to end, but they actually showed it, which isn't the case for most of the movie. My main frustration comes from how often this movie falls back into the conference room rhythm once the human plot actually gets rolling. I don't mind exposition in a Godzilla film when it's building pressure and changing the emotional temperature. Hell, I love Shin Godzilla, which is basically nothing but that. But in Godzilla vs. Destroya, the repetition really flattens the urgency. The Yamane material stays meaningful, and the Mickey and Junior thread stays emotionally legible. But a lot of the surrounding human scenes just all blend together for me because the film keeps returning to people standing around or walking through hallways, just saying the same thing over and over again. The cinematography here is very boring in those moments, which is a shame because there are scenes where the cinematography looks gorgeous. But when it's just people standing around talking, it's like, what is this, a 60s Godzilla movie? Are we really back in the Showa era? What are we doing here? You need to show, don't tell. And one scene in particular stands out as being the prime example of the film telling and not showing. Early on in the movie, these workers are forced to evacuate the building. They're told that the elevator shaft is already starting to melt. The music swells, suggesting a major disaster sequence is about to go down. They sprint out of the room, and then the film abruptly cuts to a newspaper headline explaining what happened afterwards. Why were we doing all this build-up? I don't get it. Now, this doesn't break the story by any means, but it's a revealing moment, and it shows how the film chooses efficiency over immersion, even when immersion would serve the premise better. I can feel the version of the movie that sacrifices just one of those briefing scenes and uses the time to state the longer escape sequence, because a scene like that would actually add something to the movie, give the audience something physical to hold on to besides endless graphs and charts and dialogue. Those limitations start to make more sense when you think about the production realities of the Heisei movies. These projects had tight turnarounds, and you could see where ambition and time collide. Godzilla vs. Destroya aims higher than most of its neighbors. The fact that it gets as close as it does already saes a lot about the team behind it. The film has big thematic ideas, a striking visual identity, and an antagonist built to feel like an ending, yet it still carries traces of the assembly line rhythms that shape the era. Stick to the formula, don't give them anything new, rinse and repeat. Destroya himself really benefits from the film's restraint. The movie doesn't treat him like an obstacle you knock over on the finale, which he totally could have felt that way. Instead, his presence feels like a conclusion that walks the story wearing a body. The design helps me look so aggressive and evil, and the film uses that. Oh, I like that. He feels apocalyptic, but he never really overdoes it. Like a lot of monsters from this era kind of have this over-designed quality to it. That was just the 90s in general. Like with comic books, every superhero and anti-hero had to have giant shoulder pads and big guns, but that's the 90s for you. It's also interesting to think about how this is the only original monster in this entire era. Sure, you could say Biollante and Space Godzilla, they're original monsters, right? What about Batra? Not really. Biollante is a clone of Godzilla. Space Godzilla is a clone of Godzilla. Batra is just evil Mothra. Mechagodzilla is Mechagodzilla. King Ghidorah and Mecha King Ghidorah are, monsters we've kind of already seen before. This is the only truly fresh, original monster that we've gotten, unless maybe the Delights from Return of Godzilla, if we want to get that pedantic about this. When looking at the big picture, I think that's why this movie sticks with me so much. The Heisei era has such huge highs in effects work and monster design, and it also has recurring structural weaknesses that you can't unsee once you notice them. Godzilla vs. Destroya feels like the closest the era gets to putting all of its strengths together into one film while keeping the ending uncompromised. Even with that minor gripe, the pacing and the exposition dragging, the movie lands because the filmmaking believes in finality and is willing to make the audience sit in the discomfort of it all. Getting back to the positives, of which there are many in this movie, my favorite scene in the entire film is the moment where the soldiers are picked off one by one by the little juvenile Destroyas. Oh, it's so good. It's an overt homage to Aliens, and it works beautifully. You can feel the walls closing. You can feel the panic building. You can feel how quickly a situation turns hopeless once the creatures stop being an abstract problem and start being a presence in the room with you. As a kid, that scene freaked me out in a way that most Godzilla movies never managed to do before. And I still think it's one of the smartest choices the film makes because it reminds you that the apocalypse always arrives through small, personal moments before it becomes a major headline. Which is a mindset that I personally try to carry over in my own work. Not to get too off track here, but I made a movie called Another Day Close to the Sun, and it's about the end of the world. But the entire plot is focused on one man and the familial problems that he was dealing with while everything else around him was crashing down. To me, I think that just shows how much these movies affected me creatively, even from a young age, even if it's just implicitly with that little mindset. I don't think about this movie as the one with the cool final monster, or the one where Godzilla dies, or the one where James Rolfe goes, Destroya! Destroya! Now, you may be wondering, why am I saying it as Destroya and not Destroya? I've always said Destroya. For my entire life, that's just always been my pronunciation of the name. And that's because that's the English version of the name. I'm not going to be performative and pretend to speak Japanese and say Destroya, just like how I don't say Gojira. I say Godzilla because that's how Americans know the character. That's the real name here in America. I'm going to stick to that. If you want to pronounce it as Destroya, you are more than welcome to. I'm not going to judge you, just like maybe you shouldn't judge me for saying Destroya or nuclear instead of nuclear. I just say nuclear. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm trash. Leave me alone. Getting back on topic here, outside of pronunciation.
Enemy's boss mentality.
I think about how committed this movie is to making the ending feel so purposeful. and how often it backs that purpose up with craft. The film treats the 1954 movie with so much reverence. This is the perfect companion piece to that movie. In fact, it's done so flawlessly. There are some Godzilla fans who theorize that this was set up all the way back in the 50s, and that the Oxygen Destroyer was always a setup for Destroyer to come along later down the road, which, no, you're schizophrenic, please take your medication. But I think that just goes to show how good the writing is. If it feels that purposeful and it works that well. I want you to stop and think for a moment. Think about how many movies and TV shows have had terrible endings.
For a moment, neither moves, as if moving will make this real. We see John with his hand still on the hilt of the dagger he just lodged in Danny's heart.
I know I'm kind of being topical here, and I don't want to do that with these. I want these to kind of be evergreen. But Stranger Things just ended. On the day that I'm filming this, it ended. The ending came out, and it's kind of mixed from people. A lot of people are like, eh. And as soon as this show ended, they immediately announced a bunch of new spin-offs, prequels, and live-action stuff. And it's like, is that even the ending? Look at Avengers, for example. Avengers Endgame was supposed to be the end. End is in the title. It was the end of Iron Man's story. It was the end of Captain America's story. And now they're coming back for Avengers Doomsday, only 5 years after the fact. Now, obviously, Godzilla doesn't end from here. We'll get the 1998 movie, and then Godzilla 2000, and then a billion other movies, Monsterverse, all that stuff. I'm sick of Godzilla. But what I can appreciate here is how Godzilla vs. Destroyer sticks the landing. For all these creatives knew, this was going to be the last Godzilla movie made by Japan for a very long time. You get the feeling that the filmmakers wanted to say goodbye to Godzilla. They wanted the goodbye to hurt. They were willing to let it hurt on screen, instead of just winking their way out of it and saying, well, that's it, bye. No. They cared, they put effort into it, and it fucking worked. They did the impossible. They killed off Godzilla and made it satisfying. A good ending is everything. When you look at Game of Thrones, for example, that show shit the bed with its ending. And as a result, people kind of hate the show retroactively. Like, they go back and say, actually, it wasn't all that good because the ending sucks. Maybe most of it was good, except for the last 2 seasons, we'll say that. But I think that goes to show how much a bad ending can ruin something. And I also think it shows how a good ending can save something. I'm not saying the Heisei movies are all terrible. No, but they are very hit or miss at points, let's be honest. Godzilla vs. Mothra, pretty big miss. Really bad effects. Lackluster human storyline. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, also a pretty mixed bag, if we're being honest. Right there, those are 2 big installments in this series. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah has a lackluster, mindless plot that is bonkers and makes no sense when you actually think about it. However, this last film has kind of saved the reputation of these movies in a way, where when people think about them, they usually think about Godzilla vs. Destroyer, Godzilla vs. Biollante, and Return of Godzilla. Those are the main saving graces of this universe, and they think about those alone. What I'm getting at is here, the love behind this era is mainly to do with Godzilla vs. Destroyer, and that is not a bad thing by any means. It speaks to just how great this movie really is. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You are watching Firewood Media. This is just one small part of my massive Godzilla retrospective project, where I revisit and review every single Godzilla movie and TV show. Now, technically, this is the end of the Heisei era, but I'm going to cover Godzilla the series first. I'm going to make that video and include that as well as my 1998 movie retrospective, my big supercut of all the Heisei movies. A lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff with the 1998 movie intertwined with behind-the-scenes stuff with the Toho movies during this time, so it makes sense to include it, so you can kind of watch that supercut, and it tells one big cohesive story, and you get the full picture. My retrospective on Godzilla the series should be out next Friday, and then the Super Cut will be out the Friday after that. I just want to say thank you all so much. We hit 50,000 subscribers, which is insane to think about. I am blown away by that number. I'm trying to rationalize it in my head. I just want to thank you all for watching my stuff. I am trying my best to just look at this rationally, but there's nothing rational about this. I just am so thankful. Massive thank you to our channel members for supporting the channel. Your names are listed right up here on screen. It's $1.99 a month to support the channel. You get to see videos like this one out early before they're released to the public. You get some members-only videos and behind-the-scenes updates, the whole 9 yards. And you get credited in all of our retrospectives and our short films and feature films. But whether you join or not, I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.
The
If
enemy's
you were
top
stranded
tower
on an uncharted island full of massive prehistoric species that could kill you in the blink of an eye, what would you do? Discovery that could change the world as we know it. But first, they'll have to live without it. It's not going to be. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to survive the prehistoric death machine in Kong Skull Island. These explorers are about to find out what it's like to be back at the bottom of the food chain. At the end of the war in Vietnam, researcher Bill Rhonda, the head of a top-secret government organization called Monarch, traveled to the capital in search of funding for his next. They're hoping to catch a flight to the legendary Skull Island, convinced that what they might find there could lead to incredible scientific breakthroughs. After reminding the senator they wouldn't want opposing countries to get there first, he finally agrees to fund the trip. But that was their biggest mistake. They'll be escorted by an Army aviation unit led by Lieutenant Colonel Packer. Having some trouble coming to terms with the enemy's bottom tower the assignment despite knowing the risk. While Parker prepared by men, Rhonda and his partner, geologist Houston Brooks, recruit expert tracker James Conrad, who can help them survive in the jungle in case things go wrong. And boy, are they going to. Finally, there's the photographer Missy joined up because she thinks the sports story is so the island is surrounded by a never-ending structure that makes reaching it by boat impossible. But their plan is to use helicopters to break through. After dropping some to study what lies below the island, they're going to land. Expeditions will last for 3 days until they finally regroup for extraction on the north shore, with anyone who misses the chopper out risking being left behind for good. The choppers manage to get through the storm by the skin of their teeth, and on the other side, they're met with one of the most earth-shaking views that any of them has ever seen. But it isn't long before their apocalypse now moment is brought to an abrupt end. No sooner do they start dropping charges than one of the helicopters is pitched down by a whole ass save a few dying on one by one, we start swatting down the chopper. Take the fire from the scramble to control of the situation. But they do about as well as an army of ants going up against a battleship, with all of their aircraft destroyed and more than half of the men already dead, as Kong marches away into the valley. Okay, well, that didn't take long. Kong here just took out that entire helicopter unit without so much as breaking a sweat. It looks like Packard and his men are in just a bit over their heads with this one. They need to get things under control, and fast, before the rest of them end up listed as missing in action. But from the looks of it, that's going to be much easier said than done. Let's be real. Attack helicopters armed with heavy machine guns would pretty much make you the top banana just about anywhere on Earth. When you come to Skull Island, you have to go through the king, and he didn't get that title by accident. Packard and his men might feel equipped to hold their own in any situation, but Kong here is unlike anything known to modern science. Kong is a giant ape, most closely resembling a silverback gorilla in appearance and behavior. And when I say giant, I mean giant. Put it this way, even your average everyday gorilla is nothing to sneeze at, with some of the largest males on record having reached an impressive 6.5 feet tall. and tipping the scales at nearly 600 pounds. But Kong here makes even the most swole silverback look like a minnow swimming next to a megalodon. And that comparison still hardly does him justice. Ready to be honest, while Jason Statham's mortal enemy only reached a mere 50 feet long and 50 tons in weight, this version of Kong stands at a preposterously massive 100 feet tall and weighs nearly 350,000 pounds, putting him closest in size to an adult blue whale, the largest species of animals to have ever existed. What makes things even crazier is that the Kong we see here is only that he's still growing up. And by the time that he's and he'll be able to go toe-to-toe with Godzilla himself. So, if you end up on his bad side, there's not much else to say besides, it's been nice knowing you. His enormous size naturally strength, with Kong's mighty fists boasting a force of up to 160 pounds, which, as we've just seen, is enough to crumple a U.S. Army helicopter like a freaking soda can. He may be a tank, but life in the mountains of Skull Island has also given him the agility of an Olympic gymnast on steroids. And has this ability to hold his own in battle, even when outnumbered by insanely aggressive opponents. If you're trying to harm him, then break out the heavy artillery, because he's able to withstand a concentrated barrage from the choppers so much as a trash. In fact, the only thing that did seem to hurt him was the teleplanes. It's much more. Kong's not just a brawler, but a thinker as well. Like his real-life counterparts, Kong has an impressive, almost human level of intelligence, giving him the ability to fight strategically on the fly. Tools by turning objects in the environment into weapons to supplement his already incredible strength. All that is to say, your best and pretty much only chance to survive a battle with Kong is to avoid ever getting into one in the first place, which is exactly what Colonel Packard and his men should have done. In reality, gorillas don't go around just looking for a fight. They typically only attack as a means of self-defense when they feel threatened. And Kong here is no different. While they're certainly capable of holding their own in a fight against pretty much anything, their intelligence makes them prefer to resolve conflicts by communication, not violence. Still, that doesn't mean that you should walk up to one and try to give it a belly rub, but if you keep a respectful distance and mind your manners, then you shouldn't really be in any danger. When Packard and his unit started dropping bombs on the island, Kong here felt like he was under attack, which is why he chose to retaliate by destroying their helicopters. They don't know it yet, but their seismic charges also awoke something even more dangerous than Kong himself. Another reason why he felt like he needed to stop the choppers as soon as he could, instead of escalating the situation. Parker should have immediately ordered his troops to pull back and observe Kong from a safe distance to see if he really is a threat. After all, they are in helicopters and could simply have flown right out of his range. Kong could have easily killed them all after destroying their vehicles, but instead chose to leave one thought the threat with him, which should tell you everything that you need to know when it comes to his party intentions. The truth is that the best way to beat Kong isn't at all, but instead to learn to coexist with him peacefully. He can easily kill you if he has the mind to, but if you can find a way to communicate that you aren't a threat, he can also be an incredible help you get off this island if they don't realize it. Now, let's say that you fight stop during their first encounter. Packard and the others are still looking for a fight. If you ask me, that's a pretty damn bad idea, but there's two possible approaches that they might take. In the wild, gorillas build nests where they spend an average per day sleeping, so they should try to attack him with explosives while he's down for a snooze. Option 2 is to get him while he's eating. Wild gorilla diets mostly consist of leaves and other types of foliage. If they can find an area of the island that's rich in these types of resources, then they could try setting a trap for Kong and ambushing him when he stops for a bite. Honestly, picking a fight with this guy is only going to get you a one-way ticket to Suplex City, so I wouldn't risk it. Their best bet here is to regroup, keep a low profile, get to the North Shore ASAP and then wait for their ride off of the island, because Kong isn't the only threat living in the jungles, which they're about to find out the hard way. After the battle, the expedition finds itself split into two groups, with one team of survivors led by the Tracker and the other by Packard. One of the pilots, Major Chapman, has crashed all over the radar. His chopper was carrying a bulk of their heavy weapons, so Packard and his men set out to find him, determined to bring Kong down by any means necessary, as revenge for their fallen comrades. Before leaving, Packard confronts Rhonda, demanding to know the truth about what's really going on here. It turns out that he was the only survivor from a monster from the island, but the tragedy was covered up and hidden from the public. His real goal, all along, is to prove that these monsters really exist before they escape and destroy. No, the geologist Brooks explains that the area under the island is actually full of massive hollow chambers where these creatures live, which is how they've gone undetected for so long. As they're trekking through the valley, they encounter a massive water bubble, a two-story house that emerges from the lake just yards away. But Conrad tells them to hold their fire. It looks like not everything, but where there's prey, there are predators. And it's only a matter of time before they hit the creatures at the top of the food chain. While Paxton's team is creeping through a bamboo forest, one of them is suddenly impaled by a massive stick that's really the leg of an enormous wandering arachnid, and it's hunting them for food. The men immediately open fire with their machine guns, but it reaches down with these disgusting suction cup-like tentacles and begins pulling one of them up towards its jaws. Unable to get a clear shot, they instead begin hacking the creature's legs off with their machetes, and the soldier manages to cut himself free with his knife just in time. Now they open fire on the creature once again, this time bringing it down as Packard finishes it off with his sidearm. It's a terrifying encounter, and for the soldiers, reality begins to sink in that they won't all be making it out of this alive. Okay, that was crazy. Kong is impressive enough on his own, but we've just gotten our first look at two more species of megafauna living here on the island. One prey and the other predator. Not everything that lives here wants to eat you, but some of them definitely do. So let's take a moment to look at each encounter and see what kind of strategies that we can come up with that might increase our chances of survival going forward. The first group had it easy. They were lucky enough to come across a giant species of herbivore called a skier buffalo. Despite its size, they didn't even know it was there until they were right on top of it. Well, they've evolved to blend in with their environment, something that we'll come back to in a minute. The second team, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. They met a mother longlegs, a carnivorous arachnid that stalks the island forest hunting for live food. These eight-legged creatures may not be in danger to Kong, but they can certainly do some damage. Right. It's going to be tough to outrun them, and any fight, although winnable, is going to leave several men dead at best. The most important thing to notice is what each of these creatures have in common, and that is their highly developed camouflage. Now, in the natural world, camouflage is a defense mechanism used by animals to blend in by predators like a buffalo, or getting to jump on unprotected prey. Some species also opt to cover up their scent, since the smell is prey. The survivors here themselves more difficult to detect. They could try rolling around in some mud, which would not only help them blend in visually with their natural surroundings, but also mask their scent. For extra creativity points, they could try covering blood in the area of the dead mother longlegs, since smelling like a predator is a great strategy for keeping other predators away. The mother longlegs here are arachnids, and most arachnids actually have fairly poor eyesight, hunting instead handling their prey's movements with their heightened sense of touch. If they encounter one again, they should avoid making any sharp movements, and possibly try throwing something like a rock or grenade in the opposite direction as a way to possibly distract the creature so that they can escape. If all else fails, you can always let the others panic first, since the creature will be attracted to their movements, and use them as a meat shield so that you can get away. The best thing that they can do for now, though, is try to remain undetected. This island is a literal death trap that time forgot. But if they move carefully and avoid drawing too much attention to themselves, then they just might make it to the North Shore in one piece. Sometime
Your
later,
bottom
Conrad's
tower is under
party
attack.
discovered these ruined stone structures with strange yellow markings all over the walls. Before they even know what's happening, a group of local warriors leading to a tense standoff that could turn deadly until suddenly an American who looks like Tom Hanks from Castaway comes running out to calm things down. It's Lieutenant Hank Marlowe, a pilot who
Your
crash
middle
landed on the
tower is
island
under
in
attack.
a battle nearly 30 years ago, and he's been living among the warriors ever since. Overjoyed to finally reunite with people from his home country, he explains that Kong isn't the only dangerous creature on the island, and tells them to follow him to safety before nightfall and the Meanwhile, Jackman here is still waiting for a rescue. He decides to go down to the river to refill his canteen, having no idea sudden death is lurking just below the water's surface. He's watching the blood from his face when, all of a sudden, Kong comes strolling in from behind the mountain, walking straight towards him. He forces Chapman to hide out behind a nearby rock. While getting a drink of his own, Kong thinks something heading his way, and that's when he's into the water, pulling out a massive tentacle. It's a giant squid, big enough to take down an entire aircraft carrier. But Kong easily tears its skin and begins slurping up its arms like down at the olive bowl of spaghetti. Because on Skull Island, when you're here, you're bent. With Chapman looking on, Kong drags the rest of the creature off its chest and unlocked. But there are even worse things out there than a giant squid, and they're going to come for him soon. Okay, that was a damn close call for Chapman. But he's incredibly lucky that Kong showed up when he did. Otherwise, he would have been well on his way to Davy Jones's locker, which actually gives me an idea. There's a common saying that goes, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." And that's exactly the approach that we're going to take. By now, it's painfully obvious that the island is full of unbelievably deadly creatures. But Kong here seems like he can handle just about any of them with relative ease. Most of these creatures probably want to stay out of his way, so it might be a good idea to quietly follow him, as long as he's going in the right direction, essentially using him as a giant meat shield to keep the larger predators away. As long as you can avoid accidentally getting stepped on, you can use Kong's position as the dominant species on the island to your advantage, and make your way to the shore with his help, even if he isn't actually aware that he's helping you at all. It's a better plan than trying to survive on your own. So
Your middle
if I were
tower is under
Chapman,
attack.
I'd consider tagging along with the big guy as a sort of
Dire's
bodyguard to
structures
keep
are
the nastier
fortified.
creatures in check. Marlowe brings them to the
Your top
warrior's
tower
home,
is
a
under
village
attack.
deep in the valley that's protected by giant wooden walls on all sides. But Kong isn't the only one who they're trying to keep
Your
out.
top
The
tower
truth
is under
is that
attack.
Kong was once just one member of an entire species of giant apes, who the warriors worshipped as gods, and protected them from the other dangerous creatures on the island. He mostly keeps to himself, and only attacked their helicopters because they were dropping bombs on his land, which woke up something that even Kong is afraid of. A terrifying
middle tower
species
is
of
under
subterranean amphibian-like creatures called Gulfrogs that killed off Kong's entire family. Yeah, but there's an even larger one, still lurking in the caverns. And if anything should happen to him, the monster will rise to the surface once again, killing everyone on the island. Okay, this is not good. They're men, so if there's a species on the island
Your
that
bottom
you fight, then
tower
Skulls will want to avoid running into them at all costs. These hyper-aggressive tunnel-dwelling amphibians, skull crawlers, dominant position on the island. Like most creatures, they're
Your bottom
absolutely
tower
massive,
is under
with the
attack.
smallest ones standing over 12 feet tall, while the largest ones are as big as Kong himself. They're no lightweights either.
Your
Typically
bottom
scales
tower
at
is
anywhere
under
from
attack.
40 to a whopping 100 tons. Their titanic strength makes them more than a match for our buddy Kong. But they're
Your
also
bottom tower
incredibly
is under
fast
attack.
and agile, which means that running one is going to be all but impossible.
Bottom tower.
Worst of all, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The skull crawlers sometimes even employ
Your bottom tower
strategies,
is under
which
attack.
means that when you see one, the other one is probably right behind you. That's a whole lot of nope running around on two legs. So I guess the most important question here is, how the hell do you fight one of these things if you aren't a 100-foot tall gorilla? Well, in a fair fight, you're not going to stand much of a chance, but there are some options that create such a power. Best bet is to focus. They use the legs to get around, so I'd suggest focusing their fire on its joints to slow it down. Because if it can't chase you, it probably can't control it. The skull crawlers also have fighting. Grab a sharp object, slice off its tongue, and you take out one of its primary methods of attack. Before it can eat you, it needs to find you first. So going after its senses is not a viable strategy. They also use the fish in front of its snout, since infrared thermal radiation when hunting to prey. So damaging these pits with gunfire or explosives could make it harder for the creature to track
Your
you.
top tower
The best
is under
option
attack.
of all would be to take them. You know that the burrows in the tunnels under the island, so if you strategically cave in the tunnel entrances, then you might be able to trap them inside. Finally, their heightened metabolism gives them an insatiable appetite, which means
Your
that
middle
and
Your
then
middle
ambush
tower
them and
has
go
fallen.
in for the kill. But as amphibian predators themselves, they're usually too small for something to soon see firsthand. Conrad examined the North Shore before the extraction team arrived, which Marlowe says would be impossible on foot. But as luck would have it, he just might be able to help them out. Don't fight it, never fly it. When they fly the Japanese pilots decided that instead of trying to kill each other, they
Your
should
middle
work together
tower
to get
is
the
under
hell out of
attack.
there, and began repurposing the parts from their planes into a homemade raft. He lost his friend to the skull crawlers before they could finish, but now that Conrad and his people are there, if they can help him finally get it running, then they can ride it upriver to the extraction point. While the others are busy fixing up the boat, Mason goes around taking photos of the warriors and their village until she hears something that gets her attention. Just outside the wall, she finds one of the giant water buffalo crying out in distress after being pinned down by a crashed helicopter. Although she desperately tries to help, there's no way that she could move the heavy wreckage by herself, but lucky for the buffalo, there's someone who can. Just then, Kong appears and lifts the chopper up with ease, setting the animal free. He does not look happy to see Mason, but turns and wanders back into the jungle without doing any harm, after deciding that she is not a threat. Packard, on the other hand, is still hell-bent on putting Kong down. As they're pushing through the valley, he and his group notice a giant bloody handprint high up on a nearby
Your
cliff,
bottom
a
tower
sure
is
sign
under
that
attack.
Kong is excited to see that the creature can in fact be hurt, doubling down on his intentions to find a heavy weapon. But some of the men are starting to question whether hunting Kong is really the right thing to do. Poor guy Chapman is still alone, and he's starting to feel like his time might be running out. He tries to reach the others over the radio, but isn't able to. It's no idea if he'll ever see his friends
Your
again.
top
The
tower
man
is
stops
under
for a
attack.
break.
Your top tower is
Realizing
fallen.
that the log that he's been sitting on is not a log at all. It's a giant six-legged insect, and it rears up to attack him as he opens fire on it with his rifle. The bullets don't seem to do much, but for some reason, the creature abruptly retreats into the jungle. Like
Your top tower is under
just
attack.
then, he hears a gurgling sound behind him. Giant and Gideon on the hunt. By the time it's turned around to look, it's all ready to be. One of the skull crawlers has found him before his use, and it leaps forward with its jaws opened wide, devouring the soldier before he even has a chance. Okay, man, these things are brutal. Poor Chapman here never even saw it coming. Death was quick, which is probably better than being caught by some of the other. He didn't stand much of a chance as it was, if we're being honest, but it also didn't exactly help that he made himself such an easy Now, to be fair, it would have been pretty damn hard to tell that that log was actually a giant insect in disguise. But after seeing what went down with Kong, and never get caught just sitting out in the open like you're waiting for the school bus. By now, it should have been pretty damn obvious that everything on this island is trying to kill you. You might better your chances of survival by creating a hiding. You'll be able to but still be close enough to know. I didn't. It's possible to avoid any predators. The thing about the skull crawler so the hard truth is that it was probably only a matter of time before he ended up at one lunch, especially since he was all alone. Still, find still a long way, like Chapman here. That night, Rhonda seeing this as an after failures on the battlefields of Vietnam. He's too invested to quit now, and this vendetta is only going to end when he or the ape lies dead. Conrad and his team are finally able to get the old raft started. As they fire up Marlo waves a tearful goodbye to the warriors so many years ago, and the group steps off on a rip one step closer to getting off. It turns out that Marlo here has a wife and a newborn son back stateside before he was shot down. He's sure that they've most likely moved on, but hopeful for just one chance to see them if he ever makes it home. And it looks like now he just might get his wish. Just then, they're finally able to get through to Packard's team on the radio, and he sends up a flare so that they can find a way to his location. But sure enough, all of this noise draws some unwanted attention. Suddenly, one of the researchers on the boat is grabbed by a flock of petrosaur-like creatures, lifted into the air and torn to shreds right in front of them. The others are shocked, but there's nothing that they can do, and their only choice now is to keep moving forward. Packard and the soldiers arrive at the rendezvous, find Conrad and his group already waiting for them. Conrad urges that they need to get to the North Shore as soon as possible. But Packard here is still determined to find Chapman and the heavy weapons. Overhearing this, Marlo points out that in order to reach him, they'll have to walk right into Skullcrawler territory, where they'll most likely all be killed. It's a tough choice, but since they think that Chapman could still be alive, Conrad and his team reluctantly agree with Packard's plan, on the condition that if they don't find him at the crash site, they'll give up the search and focus on getting everyone else out of there in one piece. It doesn't take long before they see why Marlo is so opposed to the idea of going west. As they push towards Chapman's last known position, they come to a mass grave full of the giant skeletons of Kong's family and other enormous species, the work of the Skullcrawler. Marlo urges them to turn around, but Packard on and they descend into the Valley of Death, where they will see some with the most dangerous predators on the island. Okay, Packard is officially losing it, and he's about to lead them straight into a death trap. He may be the man in charge, but they should really listen to Marlo on this one. After all, the guy has survived on the island for decades, and they've barely made it 2 days without being completely wiped out. He's not being paranoid when he says that. Risk. The piles of giant bones should make the danger here pretty damn obvious. I mean, one, Kong almost wiped out their entire team. It's a thing that can kill an entire Kong. Now, there's a difference between bravery and foolishness, and they may be short on time, but saving a few minutes on travel isn't going to help with the short-term benefits. I'd suggest finding another way around, or calling it quits and turning back altogether to come up with a new plan. It's a
Your
hard
middle
choice to leave a
barracks
man
are under attack. Your middle
Yes,
barracks has fallen.
if they don't make it, so what's out there? They get old. By now,
Your middle barracks
as they're walking through the grave, igniting a bucket of flammable gas that goes up in a giant fire. Rhonda tries warning them to be more careful, but it's already
Your
too
middle
late.
tower
Just
is under
then, they
attack.
hear a scary growl from something big, and Marlo shouts to them to run as they scramble to cover behind the giant tower.
under attack.
The explosion got the attention of a snowflake, and as it stalks around searching for them, it stops the bomb using its skull and dog tags before disappearing just as quickly as it came. The group started to move out. And so Ron could see something in the reflection of the camera. And in the camera, there was a space. Suddenly, the skull crawler lunges down, swallowing the man and the kid, only to disappear out of sight once again. But now they can see the flashes from his camera as it circles them in the fog. Marlowe ready, stepping to the side just as the creature charges towards him and slicing its leg with his sword. The beast begins devouring the soldiers with its long, chameleon-like tongue. They hit it with everything that they've got, but the monster sends this guy with a flamethrower flying.
Radiant structures
Explosion that activated Okay, well, it looks like Marlowe works after all. All, they don't find a way to stop fast. It's faster, stronger, and more cunning
Your
than
middle
anything
tower
on this
has
island
fallen.
besides Paul. Battle is going to come down to dumb luck just as much as strategy. Like we discussed before, one of the only ways that I can imagine stopping one of these things is by landing a critical hit to one of its weak points. The survivors should coordinate their fire to focus on its joint to reduce mobility, or on its eyes and thermal sensing pits to counter some of its primary hunting skills. Conventional weapons it's possibly going to take you out before you can wear it down. But they do work to get its attention. Combine this with its ravenous hunting style, and there just might be a way to they bone like a giant rib or the spikes on a triceratops skull and attempt to get it to rush taking out of the way. And no small amount of luck, but it might work. And if all else fails, you can always just hide out and let the others fend for themselves while you sneak away when you get an opening. Drawn to the sound of chaos, a plot arms and Marlowe cutting his way through to one of the injured men. He makes it just as the skullcrawler charges towards him, but Mason tosses her lighter into one of the gas vents and blows it up just in time. The battle is over for now, but they still have a long way to go, and this skullcrawler was only a little one. After the fight, Conrad reveals that the man that they're searching for is dead, but Packard insists that it doesn't matter. Killing Kong. Marlowe and the others have officially had enough, and the situation changes. So they agree that Conrad
Your middle barracks
back to
are
the
under
boat
attack.
while go to get the explosives. The soldiers eventually crash and Conrad and his finding their way there. So he and Mason set off for higher ground to scout out the area. When they reach a high cliffside overlooking the river, Kong suddenly appears from out of the fog, standing directly at eye level with the two explorers. They're terrified at first, but after a tense moment, Mason steps forward and gently places her hand on Kong's snout, forming a bond of friendship with the enormous beast. It's clear that he never meant to hurt them. But just then, the soldiers set off several large explosions to draw him in, and Kong turns to confront them with an angry roar, while Conrad, Mason, and Marlowe race to stop the others before it's too late. The soldiers stand their ground as Kong rushes towards them, and at the last second, Packard flings a lit torch into the lake, igniting a pool of napalm that engulfs Kong in flames. For a moment, it looks like their trap might have worked, but it isn't enough to stop him yet, and Kong throws the flames back at them before collapsing from his injuries just a few yards away. With Kong down, Packard commands his men to finish him off with the explosive charges. But that's when Conrad and the others show up just in time, ordering him to stop. One by one, his men begin to turn on him, realizing that Conrad is right, and that Kong would never have been a threat if they hadn't instigated him first. But there are things on the island that they should be afraid of, and the worst one of all is about to show up. Suddenly, there's an explosion from the water, and the Alpha Skullcrawler emerges from the swamp. Drawn in by the sounds of the fight, they stand no chance against this thing, and the soldiers all quickly run for their lives. But Packard refuses to quit. As he turns to detonate the explosives, Kong wakes up and instantly crushes Packard with one blow from his massive fist. The insane colonel is finally stopped, but now they've got an even more deadly foe to deal with. Okay, it looks like old Captain Ahab here finally got what he had coming to him. You can't say that nobody tried to warn him, but he was too blinded by revenge to see the bigger picture. Getting himself killed would have been one thing, but by wounding Kong, he's awakened the most dangerous predator of all. And now, they all might be screwed. Colonel Packard, you up! To be fair, I can't say that this whole disaster was entirely your fault, but you damn sure played a huge part in it from the very beginning. You should have ordered your men to fall back when you were getting your asses handed to you by the biggest gorilla that the world has ever seen. Instead, you kept pushing the fight because you were still butthurt about taking a fat L in Vietnam.